My name is Claire Donovan. I'm 38 years old. 22 years ago, my parents drove me away from home for the sin of loving someone they didn't approve of. I was 17. It was a February night, the kind that bites through your coat and makes your eyes water before you even step outside. My father stood at the top of the porch steps. My mother stood in the doorway behind him, arms folded, face closed like a door with a deadbolt. They didn't even let me finish packing my second bag. That same week, my father had his attorney draft a document. A formal, notarized declaration that Claire Marie Donovan was no longer recognized as a member of the Donovan family. No inheritance, no claim, no acknowledgement. I wasn't a daughter who disappointed them. I was a liability they'd chosen to dissolve. I've kept that document in a fireproof box for over 2 decades, not because I needed reminding of the pain. Because I knew, someday, the truth would need witnesses. Last month, they came back. Drove up from Cincinnati in a rented town car, stood at my front door with rehearsed smiles and the practiced warmth of people who'd spent decades performing decency for an audience. They told me they'd been telling everyone about my son. A brilliant, successful young man they'd invented from the fragments of an old newspaper profile about my business. They wanted to introduce him at their 40th wedding anniversary gala. Wanted him standing there in a suit, representing the next generation of the Donovan name, validating a lie they'd been feeding their social circle for over a year. They had no idea the grandson they'd been bragging about didn't exist. And what they found instead would dismantle everything they'd spent 40 years constructing. Cincinnati, Ohio, February 2003. I was 17, a junior at Whitmore Academy, a private school my parents had enrolled me in primarily because it had an excellent college placement record and an even better reputation for producing socially acceptable graduates. On paper, our family was seamless. My father, Gerald Donovan, ran Donovan Capital Group, a financial advisory firm he'd built from a single office above a dry cleaner in 1991 into a company managing over $80 million in assets by the time I was born. My mother, Patricia Donovan, had spent the last 20 years chairing every committee worth chairing at St. Benedict's Parish, the Cincinnati Fine Arts League, and the Lake Hills Country Club. She collected community positions the way other women collected jewelry, not for the pleasure of wearing them, but for the statement they made. Every family has an internal hierarchy. I understood mine early. My oldest brother, Derek, was 25 and already working as an associate at my father's firm. He was being groomed to inherit the whole operation, a fact my father mentioned in nearly every conversation about the future. Meredith, 23, had graduated from Vanderbilt and was finishing a graduate program in communications. She was my mother's mirror, elegant, composed, utterly committed to the performance of having it all together. And then there was me. I was what my father once referred to, without cruelty but without warmth either, as the unexpected one. My parents had considered their family complete when Meredith was born. I arrived 6 years later, a disruption in a household that had already found its rhythm. I don't think they ever fully adjusted. The evidence was quiet but constant. Family portraits were refreshed every few years. I was usually positioned slightly off-center, as if the photographer had been uncertain where to place me. Dinner conversations circled around Derek's portfolio performance and Meredith's networking opportunities. When I mentioned winning a regional essay competition, my mother said, "That's wonderful, Claire," in the same tone she used when commenting on a decent parking space. I learned to need less, to ask for less, to make myself compact enough to fit into whatever space was left after the people who mattered had taken theirs. My father had a phrase he used at every family dinner. The Donovan name opens doors, but only if you guard the name. I didn't understand then how completely I would become the threat to that door. I met James Calloway at a public library book sale on a Sunday afternoon in October 2002. He was 18, a senior at Riverside High, which was the kind of school my parents described as perfectly fine for certain students. He worked part-time at his grandfather's hardware store and spent his free hours writing short stories in composition notebooks he kept stacked in a milk crate beside his bed. He had an easy laugh and the unhurried confidence of someone who had never been taught that his worth depended on other people's opinion of it. He found me in the history section, sitting on the floor with 4 books in my lap. Stress reading, because my mother had forgotten to pick me up after my tutoring session, again, and I was waiting for her to remember. "You're going to need a cart," he said, nodding at my pile. I looked up. Nobody had made me laugh in a very long time. We spent the next 4 months meeting quietly. After school at the library. Sunday afternoons at the park on Kellerman Avenue. He never tried to impress me. He just paid attention, which was more than most people had managed. By January 2003, I knew I was pregnant. I sat in the bathroom of a Walgreens 3 miles from my school and stared at the test until the walls of the stall felt like they were pressing inward. My hands were shaking badly enough that I had to hold them against my thighs to steady them. When I told James, he sat very still for a moment. Then he said, "Whatever happens, you're not handling this alone." He didn't say it like a promise meant to reassure me. He said it like a fact. I knew I had to tell my parents. I knew what they would ask first. Not whether I was okay. Not what I needed. Their first question would be about exposure, about how to contain it, about what story could be constructed to keep the Donovan name intact. I told them on a Thursday evening in February. I'd planned to tell them at dinner, but I lost my nerve over the soup course, and finally said it while my mother was refilling her water glass, which in retrospect was the wrong moment for everyone. The table went quiet so completely that I could hear the heat running through the vents. "Gerald," my father said first, just the name, my mother's name, like a signal, not a question. My mother set down her glass. Her face didn't change expressions so much as empty of them. "Who is the father?" My father's voice was careful the way a scalpel is careful. "His name is James Calloway. He goes to Riverside High. His family owns a hardware store." The silence that followed was very long. "You've been seeing a boy from Riverside." My mother's voice was flat. "Without my knowledge, he's a good person," I said. "He's kind. He works hard." My father held up a hand. "What does his father do?" "His grandfather raised him. He works retail. He owns a small business." Another silence. My father stood. "You will not keep this pregnancy, Claire. If you do, you will not be doing it under this roof or under this name." He spoke with the precision of a man delivering a closing argument, not angry, not emotional, but certain. As if the decision had already been finalized and he was simply informing me of the outcome. I left that night. My mother opened the front door, not my father, my mother. She held it open and looked away, as if she were a bystander rather than a participant. Derek and Meredith were home. Neither of them came downstairs. I called James from a pay phone outside a gas station on Hendrick Avenue. He picked up on the first ring. "Come, just come," I said. He didn't ask questions. 15 minutes later, his car pulled into the lot and he walked toward me through the cold, unzipped his coat, wrapped it around my shoulders, and held me while I shook. I don't know what he said. I know he kept saying it. We had almost no money, no plan, and a winter that wasn't close to over. That's when Sylvia Garrett came into our lives. She was 67, a retired librarian who lived 2 houses down from my parents. She had watched the evening unfold from her living room window, seen me standing alone at the end of the driveway with a bag at my feet, and by the time I thought to knock on a door, she had already turned on her porch light. "My guest room is made up," she said when she answered. "You don't need to explain anything tonight." We stayed with Sylvia for 10 days. James found a 1-bedroom apartment in Columbus, 45 minutes away, $400 a month, above a printing shop that ran machines from 6 in the morning until 8 at night. It smelled like ink and machine oil. I called it home for 3 years. My parents had their attorney complete the disinheritance papers by the end of that week. My father sent them to my new address by certified mail. The envelope required my signature. I've thought about that detail more times than I can count, that he needed me to sign for the documentation of my own erasure. The document declared that Claire Marie Donovan forfeited all claims to the Donovan family estate, and that the family bore no legal or financial obligation to the aforementioned party, or, in the language of the document, any persons born of or dependent upon her. Any persons born of, my daughter, reduced to a subordinate clause before she existed. I kept the papers, every page. I photographed them years later and stored the copies in 3 places. Nora James Calloway was born on September 12, 2003, at Ohio State University Medical Center in Columbus. 7 pounds, 2 ounces. her father's dark hair and my blue eyes, and a scream so immediate and certain that the delivery nurse laughed in surprise. I held her and thought, whoever tried to make you invisible will have to deal with you being the loudest thing in any room you walk into. Good, the first 4 years were an education in survival. James took 2 jobs, warehouse nights, delivery days, while I finished my GED and enrolled in evening classes at Columbus State. Nora slept in a second-hand playpen in whatever room I was studying in. We ate creatively. We patched everything until patching wasn't possible, and then we found something else. I developed a habit of picking up broken furniture from curb alerts and restoring it. I sold a refinished dresser at a flea market one weekend for $60 and spent that evening thinking about how I'd done it. I sent my parents a card when Nora was born. No response. A photo for her first birthday. Nothing. By her 3rd birthday, I stopped reaching toward a door that had been sealed. James and I weren't married. We talked about it in the abstract, someday, when things were easier, when we had space to breathe. Someday was always arriving just past the next corner. Then on November 4th, 2007, a construction truck with failed brakes ran through a red light on 4th Street in Columbus. James had been driving home from his night shift. The officer who came to my apartment at 6 in the morning said he wouldn't have known what was happening. He was 23 years old. Nora was 4. His life insurance through the warehouse job paid out $15,000. That was what I had. That, and a 4-year-old, and a city I'd chosen by necessity rather than desire. I want to be honest with you about the weeks that followed. There were days I did not function. There were days I sat on the bathroom floor of our apartment while Nora watched cartoons in the next room, and I simply could not locate a reason to stand up. I found the reason eventually. She was always the reason. What pulled me out, practically, was the furniture. I'd been selling restored pieces at a Columbus antique co-op for 2 years, mostly as supplemental income. After James died, I made it the only income. I learned every step of the process: sourcing, stripping, repairing joints, refinishing, staging, selling. I developed an eye for which pieces could be transformed and which were simply done. It turned out that skill, seeing potential in something others had discarded, applied to more than furniture. In 2009, I met Carolyn Whitfield. She was 54, recently retired as the owner of a well-regarded home staging company in Columbus, and she was looking for someone to take over her client list. She found me instead at a local artisan market, where I'd been selling custom-restored furniture from a 10x10 booth. She stood in front of a secretary desk I'd rebuilt from salvage for 40 minutes, asking me questions about my process. "You don't just fix things," she said. "You understand what they were trying to be before they got damaged." I didn't know how to answer that. "Come work with me for a year," she said. "We'll figure out the rest." 2011, with Carolyn's mentorship and a small business loan I applied for 4 times before being approved, I launched Cornerstone Home Interiors, a residential and commercial interior design firm based in Columbus. First-year revenue, just under $80,000. Enough 2012 employees. Revenue, $1.4 million. 2013. Columbus Monthly ran a feature profile on me. The headline read, "Built from scratch, how a single mother turned salvage and instinct into one of Columbus's most respected design firms." The journalist, a woman named Dana Park, spent 2 days with me. I talked about losing James, about building the business from a flea market booth, about raising Nora alone. I did not mention my parents' names or their city, not to shield them, to protect Nora from becoming a character in a story she hadn't agreed to tell 1428 employees. Revenue approaching $6 million. An office on the 4th floor of a building I'd helped redesign. My daughter Nora was 20 years old, a junior at Ohio State majoring in social work. She had James's hair and my stubbornness and a clarity of moral reasoning that made me slightly nervous in the best possible way. 22 years, no contact from the Donovan family, until last month. It was a Tuesday evening in October, 2024. I'd just come home from a consultation with a client, a hotel renovation in the short north, a contract worth just over $1 million. My mind was still cycling through material samples and structural considerations when I turned onto my street and saw the town car parked in front of my house. 2 figures at my front door. The man had more gray now, a slight forward slope to his shoulders that hadn't been there before. The woman held herself with the same rigid vertical composure. I remembered, the posture of someone permanently braced against the possibility of disorder. Gerald and Patricia Donovan, my parents. I sat in my car for 60 seconds, then I got out. My father spoke first. Claire. A pause. His eyes moved over my coat, my car, my house, performing the rapid assessment of a man who had spent his life evaluating assets. You've done well, my mother stepped forward. Her face had the particular tension of someone delivering a scripted opening line. We know about your son, Claire. We know you have a son. We'd very much like to meet him. I looked at her. We'd like to reconnect, my father added. As a family. I let them in. I've asked myself many times since why I did, and the most honest answer is that I needed to see what 22 years of silence had produced in them, whether it had changed anything at all. My father sat in my living room and evaluated it with the same quiet precision he brought to everything: the refinished hardwood floors, the restored crown molding, the original art on the walls. My mother perched at the edge of the sofa, as though full contact with it might compromise her. Your anniversary, I said. That's what this is about. 40 years, my father said, December 6th. We're hosting a dinner at the Broadmoor Club, 250 guests. The mayor, the diocese, our entire professional network. What does that have to do with me? My mother and father exchanged the look of two people who had rehearsed this conversation and were now executing it. There have been questions about you, Claire, about what happened. People remember that we had a third child. They've become more persistent in their questions. So you need me to appear, confirm that the family is intact. We need your son. My mother's voice held the certainty of a woman who had not yet encountered the error in her plan. We've spoken of him to our friends, to several members of the business community. He should be present at the dinner, representing the family. The room was very quiet. Who told you I have a son? The article, my father said, with the slight impatience of someone addressing an unnecessary complication. The Columbus monthly piece. It mentioned your child, your company. We may have read it somewhat, you read it wrong. My voice was even. You assumed a gender and built an entire story around an assumption. My father's jaw tightened. If you're willing to come to the dinner, you and your son, we're prepared to make it worth your while. He reached into his jacket and placed a folded check on the coffee table between us. $200,000, 3 hours at the dinner. Family photographs. And we're prepared to reinstate you in the family trust. The combined estate is valued at approximately $4.5 million. Equal share with Derek and Meredith. I looked at the check. Then at my mother, who was nodding as if this were simply an administrative matter being resolved. $200,000, I said. Is that the current market rate for 22 years of pretending your child is dead? My father's expression hardened. Let's not be dramatic, Claire. We're offering you an opportunity. You're offering me a transaction. You want to buy a prop for your dinner party, a grandson who doesn't exist. You're being unreasonable. His voice had the edge of a man unaccustomed to not closing a deal. We can resolve this quietly, or we can make things complicated. If necessary, we can reach out to your son directly, explain the family situation, give him context. That's a threat, I said. You're threatening to contact my child and tell them your version of the past. We prefer to think of it as an opportunity for connection, my mother said. I was about to respond when I heard footsteps on the stairs. Mom, everything okay? I thought I heard voices. Nora stopped at the bottom step. She was wearing an oversized Ohio State sweatshirt and carrying a highlighter and the printout of what looked like a research paper. Her dark hair was in a loose braid. She looked exactly like herself, 20 years old, completely unimpressed, mildly concerned. My mother rose from the sofa. Her expression cycled through several stages very quickly. Who is this? This is Nora, I said. I positioned myself slightly in front of her, an instinct I didn't examine. My daughter, my father said. His voice had gone strange, but the article said child. You supplied the rest. Nora looked at the two strangers in our living room. Her gaze was the clear, evaluating look of someone who had grown up knowing exactly who these people were and what they had done. These are the grandparents, she said. The ones who put you out when you were 17. My mother flinched. It was more complicated than which part, Nora said calmly. The part where you handed a pregnant teenager her bag and opened the door, or the part where you spent 22 years telling your friends she'd moved away. She tilted her head slightly. I've known about the letter since I was 12. I've read it. I know what it says. I know it includes language about any persons born of her. That's me. I'm the clause. My father began to speak. Young lady, Nora looked at him with the calm patience of someone who has prepared for this exact moment. I'm not your young lady. I'm your granddaughter, the one you designated as a legal nonentity before I was born. She turned to me. They came for a grandson, didn't they? Yes. She looked back at my parents. Surprise. My father recovered faster than my mother. He recalibrated visibly, the lawyer in him, the strategist, already adjusting to the new variable. A granddaughter, he said slowly. That could work. We could revise the narrative. Nora could attend as what? Nora said, the secret granddaughter you've been hiding, the daughter of the teen mom you erased. I was born in Columbus. I've lived here my whole life. I'm a junior at Ohio State. She laughed, and it was not a warm sound. You want me to tell 250 people that I've been living abroad? The dinner is December 6th, my father said, checking his watch. 7 weeks. We'll need an answer by the 15th. I stood. I think you need to leave. Claire, my mother said, think about what you're passing up. This is an opportunity to put the past behind us. To heal as a family, I watched them walk to their car. My father helped my mother into the passenger seat. They drove away. When the car disappeared, Nora spoke. You're not actually considering this. I looked at my daughter. No, I said, but I'm not finished with them either. That night, after Nora went upstairs, I opened a fireproof lockbox I kept in my closet. I hadn't touched it in several years. Inside were the original disinheritance papers. 3 pages, notarized, signed by Gerald Arthur Donovan and Patricia Ann Donovan, witnessed by an attorney named William Prout on February 19, 2003. My father had sent them certified mail, had required my signature for receipt. I have thought about that detail for 22 years, the requirement that I formally acknowledge the document of my own elimination. Claire Marie Donovan hereby forfeits all claim to the Donovan family estate, and the Donovan family bears no legal or moral obligation to the aforementioned party, or any persons born of or dependent upon her. Any persons born of? Nora erased in advance. I photographed every page, uploaded them to 2 separate cloud accounts, made physical backup copies. Then I sat on my bedroom floor for a while just thinking, Mom. Nora was in the doorway. She sat beside me on the floor, picking up the first page of the document and reading it carefully. When she reached the end, she set it down. Her eyes were bright and dry and absolutely direct. They actually did it, she said quietly. They actually wrote a legal document. They did. She was silent for a moment. What are you going to do? I looked at the papers spread across the floor. I don't know exactly yet. But they're not going to be able to pretend anymore. Not in the way they have been. Nora nodded. I have an idea, she said. Let me tell you, the next morning, I called Sylvia Garrett. She was 79 now, still living in the same house on Aldercroft Lane 2 doors from my parents' old address in Cincinnati. She answered on the second ring. Claire, I was wondering when I'd hear from you. I think there must be something in the air. I told her everything, the visit, the invented grandson, the check, the anniversary dinner. Sylvia was quiet for a long moment. Those people, she finally said. You know, I watched that whole evening from my front window. Saw you standing at the end of the driveway. Saw your father close the door. I should have come out sooner. I've thought about that night more times than you'd believe. Sylvia, I said, you had a security camera on your porch back then. Do you still have the footage? Another pause. You know, she said, I have never in my life deleted a single file if I thought it might matter someday. Let me go check my external drive. 25 minutes later, my phone buzzed with an email attachment. A grainy, time-stamped image. A 17-year-old girl standing at the end of a residential driveway in winter, a bag at her feet, a coat that wasn't warm enough. 9:44 p.m. February 19, 2003. The house number was partially visible in the frame. That's you, Sylvia said when I called her back. That's the night. Would you be willing to say so officially if it came to that? Honey, her voice was iron. I've been waiting 22 years for the right occasion. 3 days later, I received a call from an Ohio area code I didn't recognize. It was my brother Derek. I know I'm the last person you expected to hear from. His voice was different, older, but also stripped of the smooth performance I remembered. More tired. I just need you to know some things before whatever you're planning happens. Talk, I said. The grandson story. He exhaled. That started with Mom 2 years ago. She found the Columbus Monthly article, skimmed it, saw a single mention of your child and your business, and constructed an entire person from that. A grandson who'd inherited your entrepreneurial instincts. She started telling people about him at church. At the club. Dad went along with it because he always goes along with whatever story makes the current situation more manageable. Derek's voice cracked slightly. They've been having dinner party conversations about this person for 18 months, Claire. A person who doesn't exist. I closed my eyes. Even now, it still managed to surprise me. Why are you telling me this? Because I watched from the top of the stairs the night they put you out. He stopped. I was 24 years old. I had a car. I could have driven you somewhere. I called Meredith afterward, and we talked about it for an hour, and then we didn't talk about it again for 15 years. He exhaled. I've been wrong about a lot of things for a very long time. I'm not calling to ask you to forgive me. I'm calling because there's something you should know about the dinner. What? Pastor Michael from St. Benedict's is coordinating a live stream for the anniversary dinner. It's being broadcast on the parish social media channels as a celebration of a long marriage in the community. He paused. There will be several hundred people watching online in addition to the guests in the room. A live stream, 250 witnesses in person, he confirmed, and an unknown number watching remotely. Derek, I said slowly, if I decide to attend, would you and Meredith be willing to stand with me? A long pause. Meredith and I talked last week, he said finally. We decided that if you were going to do something, we weren't going to let you do it alone. Not again. He paused. Don't tell Mom and Dad you're coming. Can you do that for me? Yes. Good. Then we'll be ready. My father called the following Friday. His voice had the clipped efficiency of a man who considered prolonged negotiation beneath him. Claire, the 15th is tomorrow. We need an answer. I'll increase the offer to $250,000. Final, I've been speaking with Derek. Silence. He told me about the story you've been telling people. The grandson you invented from an article you didn't read carefully. We embellished the details of you invented a person. You fabricated an entire human being and fed him to your social circle for a year and a half. My voice stayed level. And now you want me to come replace him with a real grandchild you've never bothered to meet. You are being deliberately difficult. His voice sharpened. We are offering you a significant sum and an equal share in this family's estate. After everything, I let the phrase stand by itself for a moment. After you put a 17-year-old out of your house in February, after you mailed her the legal paperwork for her own erasure 3 days later, I kept my voice very steady. You're not offering me anything, Dad. You're trying to buy your way out of a lie that's gotten too large to maintain. If you don't attend this dinner, he said, his voice dropping to the register he used for final positions, you will have permanently closed every door between yourself and this family. You closed those doors 22 years ago. I heard my own voice say it with a certainty I'd been building toward for 2 decades. And honestly, the life I built behind them is better than anything I would have had standing on your side of them. He hung up. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with Nora and Carolyn Whitfield, who'd become as close to chosen family as anyone in my life. They want a performance, Carolyn said, turning her coffee mug slowly. They want you to show up, look gracious, confirm the narrative, and go back to being invisible. They want to use you, Nora said, the way they've always tried to use you as something to manage. I looked at both of them. I'm going to the dinner. Nora's head came up. Not to give them what they want. To give myself what I've needed for 22 years. I spread the photographs of the disinheritance letter across the table, alongside the image Sylvia had sent me. They've been telling their story for 2 decades. I'm going to tell mine, in front of everyone who matters to them on their stage at their event during their live stream. I looked at Nora, not to destroy them, to stop being a secret. I'm going with you, Nora said, without hesitation. Are you sure? This is going to be, I have spent my entire life knowing that 2 people chose their reputation over my right to exist, she said steadily. I'm very sure. I called Derek that night. Your offer to stand with me, is it still on the table? Meredith and I have talked. We're ready. We'll be there. One thing, don't warn them. Don't tell them I'm coming. Understood. Saturday, December 6th, 2024, 7:20 in the evening. The Broadmoor Club's private dining room had been dressed the way my parents would have wanted everything dressed. Understated wealth, nothing flashy. The kind of room that said its occupants had the confidence not to need to impress you. Ivory linens pressed flat. Centerpieces of white lilies and dark greenery. Waitstaff moving between tables with practiced silence. 250 guests in formal attire. A raised platform at the end of the room. 2 microphones. A camera mounted on a tripod and already live streaming to what I would later learn was over 800 parish and community followers online. I stood in the entrance with Nora beside me. She wore a deep green dress, simple and composed. I had chosen charcoal gray, professional, quiet, the color of someone who doesn't need to announce herself because she knows exactly who she is. "You okay?" she asked. "I'm about to walk into my parents' 40th anniversary dinner to tell their guests that the grandchild they've been describing doesn't exist." I looked at her. "I'm terrified." That's not what I asked. I looked at my daughter, this fiercely honest, entirely self-possessed person who had grown up with the knowledge of what her grandparents had done and chosen to build herself from it rather than be broken by it. "Yeah," I said. "I'm okay." We walked in. The room was loud with conversation, the particular hum of 200 people who all know each other and are all performing the same comfortable ease. My parents were at the far end of the room near the raised platform, my mother in a pale gold dress, my father in a dark suit, both of them surrounded by the sustained attention of people who had known them for decades. They hadn't seen us yet, but others had. A woman near the entrance turned. "Is that?" And her voice was low, but it carried the way these things carry. Within 20 seconds, heads were turning in the slow, sequential way of a crowd that senses something arriving. My father had just stepped up to the platform, tapping the microphone lightly. "Thank you all for being here tonight. 40 years of marriage has taught me that certain things are worth protecting above everything else: your family, your reputation, the faith of the people who have trusted you. Patricia and I have tried to build our lives around those principles." He paused for the kind of pause that invites applause, and it came. "Our children and this community," he saw me. His face did something complicated. Behind him, my mother had turned toward the sound of the shifting crowd and gone very still when she found my face. I started walking. The crowd parted, not dramatically. People simply stepped back, registering the weight of what was moving through the room. Nora walked beside me, unhurried. At the edge of the platform, Derek appeared. Meredith stood beside him. They didn't move to stop me. They stood as witnesses. "Claire," my father said into the microphone, and the correction of his earlier stumble was its own small confession. What we weren't expecting. I climbed the steps to the platform and stood beside him. He held the microphone and I put my hand out for it, and for a second he looked at my hand, and then he gave it to me. "Hello." My voice traveled through the room with the clean clarity of someone who had been rehearsing this sentence for 22 years, not because she needed to, but because she'd earned the right to it. "My name is Claire Donovan. I'm Gerald and Patricia's youngest child." I looked out at the room. For those of you who asked where I was, I've been here. I never went abroad. I never moved away. The room was absolutely still. The live stream camera was tracking me. I could see the comment ticker on the monitor near the camera beginning to move. On February 19th, 2003, when I was 17 years old, my parents learned I was pregnant. That same night, they put me out of the house. My father had his attorney prepare the paperwork within the week. She reached into her bag and withdrew the document, folded to the relevant page. "This is the notarized disinheritance agreement he mailed me by certified mail 3 days after I left. It states that I forfeited all claims to the Donovan family estate, and that the family," I held it up toward the camera, "has no obligation to me or to any persons born of me." She gestured toward the edge of the platform. "That person, the one they had no obligation to before she was even born, is my daughter Nora. Your granddaughter." I paused. "The grandson you've been telling your friends about for the last 18 months doesn't exist. You invented him from a magazine article you didn't read carefully enough." A gasp came from somewhere in the middle of the room. My father reached for the microphone. "Claire, this is not—" I held it out of his reach calmly. "When is the right time, Dad?" You came to my home last month with a check for $250,000 and asked me to bring a fictional grandson to this dinner to make a real lie look true. I looked at the crowd. I'm not here for the money. I'm not here for the estate. I'm here because I have been a secret in this room for 22 years and I am done with that. From the side of the room, Gerald. A man's voice, careful and deliberate. Father Donaldson, the parish priest, moving forward with the steady authority of someone accustomed to rooms that have gotten out of hand. Is what your daughter is saying accurate? My father stood at the microphone. He looked at the room. He looked at the mayor's table, at the diocesan representative, at the partners of his firm who'd known him for 30 years. He looked for an exit in the story and couldn't find one. We made decisions, he said finally, during a difficult time. You made me stand at the end of the driveway in February until my face went numb. I said, quietly now, just to him, just to the platform. I was 17, I was scared, I needed you. Those are the decisions you made. Derek stepped up onto the platform, then Meredith. They stood on either side of me without touching me, the way siblings sometimes stand, close enough to mean something. She's telling the truth, Derek said. Meredith and I were in the house that night. We didn't come downstairs, he looked at his parents. That's our failure, but everything she said is true. The room erupted. Not violently, not the way rooms erupt in movies, but with the unmistakable roar of 200 people processing something they can't unknow. Phones were already raised. The live stream comment counter was scrolling too fast to read. At the back of the room, Sylvia Garrett was standing. I'd arranged for her to be there, arranged for her travel, and she had come without a single word of complaint. She was 79 years old and she stood up straight and said, simply, I was her neighbor. I saw that child standing in the cold. I gave her somewhere to sleep that night. The Donovans never once asked where she went. I looked at my father one more time. He had the expression of a man watching something he'd spent decades building come apart in 3 minutes. I felt nothing about that surprised me. I'm not here to take anything from you, I said. I'm not contesting the will. I'm not suing anyone. I held up the document, the disinheritance papers, the evidence of 22 years. I'm keeping these, not as a weapon, as a record. But understand this. If you spread lies about my daughter or contact her without her consent or build new stories about us for new audiences, I will make everything I have public. The letter, the photograph, the witnesses. I nodded toward Sylvia. And now this room. Nora stepped up beside me and took the microphone. I'm Nora, she said, the granddaughter. I'm 20 years old. I've known my whole life that these two people decided their reputation was worth more than my mother, and by extension, more than me. She looked at Gerald and Patricia directly, with a composure that I knew had cost her nothing, because she had never needed their approval to know she was worth something. You could have known me. You could have been at my birthday parties. You could have been there when I graduated high school. She paused, you chose not to, and that was never our fault. It was yours. And now you don't get to rewrite that into something easier to carry. She handed back the microphone and walked off the stage. I followed. Behind us, the room was loud with the particular kind of noise that happens when a truth lands in a space full of people who will now have to decide what to do with it. At the entrance, I turned back. One thing, I said, and the room quieted enough to hear me. I'm not asking for your sympathy. 22 years ago, I left that house with almost nothing. Today, I run a design firm in Columbus with 28 employees and revenues approaching $6 million annually. My daughter is a junior at Ohio State. We built those things without anyone in this room. I came here tonight because my parents tried to buy my silence last month. And because silence has cost me enough already. Carolyn met us at the door. Ready? Very. We walked out into the cold December night. The air was clean and thin and carried the faint sound of the city settling into itself. Mom. Nora's voice beside me. Did we do the right thing? I thought about a 17-year-old standing at the end of a driveway in February, a bag at her feet, watching tail lights disappear around a corner, thinking, this is the end of everything. I was wrong about that. We told the truth, I said. We set a record straight. We let them face what they built. I pulled her clothes. That isn't revenge. That's long overdue. What happens now? Now we go home. The clip from the live stream was shared 400 times within the first 6 hours. By morning, it had been viewed over 50,000 times across multiple platforms. Someone uploaded the full segment to YouTube, where it accumulated views faster than any algorithm could comfortably explain. Derek called me Sunday morning with a full account. The mayor and his wife left within 40 minutes. Father Donaldson spoke privately with your father for over an hour after the room cleared. Half the partners from the firm were in attendance. Derek's voice was quiet. I don't think any of them will be looking at him the same way going forward. On Monday, a brief item appeared in the Cincinnati Business Courier. Family business, local financial advisor's anniversary celebration marked by unexpected remarks. The article was carefully neutral. The comment section was not. I've known Gerald Donovan for 15 years, I would never have guessed. What kind of man puts documents in his daughter's hands and mails them certified? The Donovans attend our parish. I've sat next to them for 8 years and had no idea. Anyone who saw that live stream will understand something different now about that family by Wednesday. Gerald had resigned quietly from 2 board positions he'd held for more than a decade. 2 weeks after the dinner, Carolyn forwarded me an email that had come through the company's general contact form. It was from a journalist named Isabel Chen at Columbus Monthly. She was asking about a follow-up piece. But what struck me wasn't the email. It was what came in through the contact form over the following 3 days. Not business inquiries, personal ones. Your story made me call my sister for the first time in 9 years. I'm a woman who got cut off by her family at 21. I didn't know this could end any way other than in silence. Thank you for showing what it looks like to stop asking for permission to exist. The week after the dinner, Derek and Meredith drove up to Columbus. I hadn't seen either of them in 22 years. They sat in my living room, the same room where my parents had sat with their check and their fiction, and we talked for 7 hours. Derek told me about the years of guilt, about dialing my number and hanging up, about the particular kind of cowardice that dresses itself as self-preservation. Meredith cried when she met Nora. Her children, 10 and 13, played in my backyard while the adults tried to figure out whether 22 years of absence could be navigated honestly. I'm sorry, Derek said. I know it doesn't fix anything. No, I said, it doesn't. But it's a real thing. That matters. Nora watched them from the doorway. This young woman who had grown up without extended family, seeing for the first time what it might look like to have something imperfect but genuine. 10 days after the dinner, my phone rang. A Cincinnati number I didn't recognize. It was my mother, Claire. Her voice was smaller than I'd heard it since I was very young. I'm not calling to ask for anything. I don't have the right. Why are you calling? A long pause. I've watched the video, she said. 12 times. I keep watching your face when you're speaking, trying to find, she stopped. Trying to find the girl I knew before I made her a stranger. I said nothing. Your father is, she didn't finish the sentence the way she'd started it. People he's known for 30 years are looking at him differently now. He doesn't have language for it. I didn't come there to punish him. Or you. I know, she said. That was the hardest part to understand. That you weren't there for revenge. She paused. You were there because we never gave you any other way to be seen. Why did you call, Mom? Because I needed to hear your voice. She was crying now, quietly, in the way of a woman who has not been accustomed to allowing herself to. Because I watched my granddaughter stand on a stage in front of 250 people and tell them that she grew up knowing we hadn't wanted her. And I couldn't breathe for about a minute. And then I realized I hadn't called you in 22 years and I might run out of time to do it. I'm not ready to forgive you, I said. I may not get there. I don't know, that's more than fair. But I'm not going to hang up on you, she exhaled, something releasing in it. That's more than I deserve. We stayed on the line for another few minutes, not saying much. Then she said goodbye. She didn't ask for another chance. She didn't try to bargain for one. Maybe that was something, or maybe it was the beginning of something very long and very slow. I didn't know yet. I was willing to find out. Christmas 2024. My dining room table, the one I'd bought at an estate sale 8 years ago, stripped, refinished, extended with a leaf I'd found at a salvage shop that matched within a fraction of a shade, seated 11. It had never been this full. Nora at my right, Carolyn at my left. Sylvia, who had flown up from Cincinnati again because she said she'd been eating holiday dinners with her neighbor's cat for too many years and was done with it. Derek and his wife. Meredith and her daughter. My business partner, Theo, who had nowhere to be and had been coming to my holidays for the last 3 years anyway. My parents weren't there. We hadn't reached that. Maybe we wouldn't. But looking around that table, at the people who had chosen to come, who had wanted to be in this specific room on this specific evening, not because it was convenient or required or strategic, but because they wanted to be with us, I understood something I'd been trying to articulate for a long time. I had spent 22 years mourning a family that had only ever wanted a version of me that didn't actually exist. I had been grieving something that was never real. The thing that was real was here, built by choice, not blood. Nora stood to make a toast. She unfolded a piece of paper from her cardigan pocket. "I wrote this down," she said, "because I knew I'd lose the words if I didn't." She looked at me. "When I was little, I used to ask why we didn't have more family. You always told me the truth, that some people make choices, and that their choices weren't about me. It took me a long time to really understand that. But I understand it now. And I know that everything I have, not the circumstances, but the actual substance of who I am, came from watching you refuse to let other people's choices define what you were capable of." She raised her glass, "To the family we choose, and to the people brave enough to build one." Everyone drank. Later, after the dishes were cleared and people had settled into smaller conversations, I stood at the kitchen window looking out at the yard. Nora came up beside me. "You okay?" I looked at my daughter. At this whole, complicated, improbable life I had built out of the rubble of everything I'd thought I needed and didn't have. "Yeah," I said, "I really am. If you're still with me, let me close with this. 22 years ago, I was a 17-year-old standing at the end of a driveway in February, watching my father's car back out and my mother's porch light go off. I thought my life had ended. I was so completely wrong. I had James for as long as I had him. I had Sylvia, who turned on her porch light when she didn't have to. I had Carolyn, who saw potential in a woman selling furniture at a flea market and decided to invest in it. I had Nora, who grew up knowing the full truth and chose to become fierce rather than damaged. And eventually, I had myself, the version of me who stopped waiting for someone else's permission to be worth something. If you are somewhere in your life where the people who were supposed to love you are making you feel like you have to be smaller, quieter, less visible to earn their acceptance, I understand that feeling from the inside. I know how long it can last. I know how much space it takes up. Here is what I know now, from the other side of 22 years. Their refusal to see you has nothing to do with whether you are worth being seen. Setting limits around people who have hurt you is not cruelty. It is the most honest thing you can do. And sometimes the family you build from nothing is the most real thing you will ever have. My parents have not apologized. Not directly, not in the full and unambiguous way that would mean something. Gerald has gone quiet. Patricia calls sometimes. I answer when I'm ready to. Derek and Meredith are trying. We all are. But I am not waiting for any of them to change before I keep living my life. The life I built. The life I earned. The one that belongs entirely to me and no one else. That's not a storybook ending. It's a true one, and true endings don't need to be beautiful. They just need to be honest. Thank you for staying with me through this. If something in it landed for you, if it made you feel less alone in something you've been carrying, share it. Pass it forward, because everyone deserves to be seen. Not someday, now.